place, and I mentioned KC. Can we take a look at the
Islanders,
Islanders
yeah.
and Kansas City? Because here it is, Kansas City. Correct me if I'm wrong. They have an arena.
Yes,
They're
they do.
looking for a tenant, and it's like they're telling owners, I think it's this number.
Yeah.
And it's not the number 3 as to rent. So
Well,
help me out there?
here's the problem in Kansas City. Let's break down the market. You got Kansas City Chiefs, because when you look at it, there are 3 tenets that you need to look at. You need to look at the government support, which is an arena, which obviously they have in Kansas City. Number 2 is cable TV. Number 3 is corporate support. Kansas City is a very small cable TV market. You know, now you're with Sabre and you're a baseball expert and all that other stuff.
Oh, thank you.
So anybody who's with Sabre is a baseball expert. So you know that Albert Pujols signed that huge contract with the Anaheim Angels, or Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, along with C.J. Wilson. Who do you think paid for that contract?
The cable providers?
Rupert Murdoch. He gave Arte Moreno a new 20-year contract, giving him something like $1.5 billion over the 20 years, or $2 billion over the 20 years. Whatever Rupert offered the Dodgers, Moreno called Rupert Murdoch's people and said, is that deal still on the table for the Dodgers? Dodgers, by the way, once they're sold, because there are competing cable entities in Southern California, Time Warner with the Lakers now, that network which is kicking off in the fall, and Rupert Murdoch's network, name the price for the Dodgers. The rights come due 2015. What do you think an LA Dodgers will be worth if the Angels are getting, you know, $3 billion over 20 years? That's the money that paid for Pujols, and that's the money that paid for C.J. Wilson. You're not going to get that kind of money for a hockey team in Kansas City. The Royals hardly get any TV money. I know the Padres are up to about $37 million. They get $37 million. Angels get $160 million. There's a disparity there. So Kansas City doesn't have a TV market. And then when you go to the corporate market, Kansas City Chiefs take about 80% of the corporate dollars. Kansas City Royals get about 15, and then the other 5% colleges and NASCAR. There's not the corporate money in Kansas City, so it doesn't make sense. Which brings me to the Islanders. And I just wrote something about the Islanders and about Charles Wang. And I've already gotten the hate mail from the Islander fans saying, what do you mean they won out of Nassau Coliseum? Well, yeah, they do want out of Nassau Coliseum because the lease is bad. They hardly get any revenues. They don't get the 92 cents a dollar that, say, you could maybe get in Cincinnati with the Reds and Bengals, which they do get 92 cents, or in Indianapolis, because Indianapolis decided to spend $1 billion in sports between the football stadium and paying to keep Herb Simon happy with his NBA team. Indianapolis is virtually paying Herb Simon to keep the Indianapolis Pacers in Indiana and not move it to another city like Kansas City. You know, so if you're an owner and the city says, yeah, I'll pay you, what are you going to say? So anyway, if Charles Wang decides to move to Brooklyn, it's not as clean as moving to another city, because he's moving into a building where he would be the second tenant. But he's also moving into a building that, even though it's being heavily subsidized by New York City and New York State, is still, there's some private money, whether it's Bruce Ratner with Forest City Ratner and Prokhorov, the Nets owner, who also has 45% of the building. So the deal that would have to be cut is that Wang would have to probably buy into the Nets and buy into the building, and the Nets people would have to buy into the Islanders to make sense, because Wang is going to want as much revenue as he can out of that building. If he helps pay some of the bills, then he'll get some of the Nets revenues. The Nets people will get some of the Islanders revenues. And then there's the question of the attendance, which the building will only seat 14,500 for hockey. But you're a baseball guy. You're a baseball guy. I'm going to ask you if you know the Fenway principle.
The Fenway principle?
Yes.
I probably am going to go off on a completely different tangent, but one of the keys as to keeping Fenway was the fact that there was no debt service involved.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that.
What is
I'm talking about the Fenway principle is a guy by the name of Bill Sutton, who's now economics professor at University of Central Florida. Years ago, he and I went out, and he said, and we're talking about Pittsburgh, because if you remember, Three Rivers Stadium went down from about 50,000 for Pirates games to about 36,000.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number. But the Fenway principle is pretty simple, because the Red Sox play in the smallest, or was the smallest ballpark in Major League Baseball, ticket scarcity.
Right.
So if you want the ticket, you really want the ticket, you buy it in the off season. Because, and this was even before the Fenway became a destination and before the Red Sox won in 04 and 07, create a scarcity. What happened in Major League Baseball, and you probably know this just as well as anybody else, Cleveland downsized, the Mets downsized, the Yankees downsized, the Pirates downsized, the Miami Marlins downsized. The new building, if it's ever built in Oakland, would be only 32,000 seats. Now, why is that? You create an artificial scarcity. And if you get people who are interested and they really want to go to games, they're going to make sure they get the tickets early, like in the off season, or buy the ticket plan in the off season. So they're guaranteed to get into the stadium. Yeah, the Mets cut 12,000 tickets per game. The Yankees cut 7,000. Now, you know, you start doing the math, 12,000 over 81 games is nearly, what, 850,000 tickets? And in the Yankees' case, it's probably around 600,000 tickets. They created a scarcity, but the Mets are so bad, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but then with the phenomena of tier pricing as to premiums on particular days, opponents, as well as you've already alluded to, the luxury boxes, premium seatings, it becomes somewhat of a wash, or actually more of a profit.
More of a profit, you know, more of a profit. So the Islanders could, in that case, prosper. But Wang will have to give up a piece of his team. And does he want to give up a piece of the team? Does he want an equity deal with the arena? Because, you know, in his case, that's the only way it makes sense in Brooklyn. And that's the problem with the NFL in Los Angeles. You do have Mark Davis in Oakland, who's kicked the tires in L.A. There's a group called Bring Back the Rams that's convinced that St. Louis is going to move back, or the Rams, St. Louis Rams will move back to L.A. And the problem in Los Angeles is rather simple. The buildings are being built by private money, not public money, which means that Ed Roski and the City of Industry, which is 20 miles east of LA, or the downtown stadium, which is being pushed by AEG, if they're going to put up all the money, and of course there's going to be subsidies there. Let's not kid ourselves. There's going to be subsidies there, but anyway, if they're putting up the money, they're going to have to take some of the revenue streams that NFL owners are very used to. Like Mike Brown in Cincinnati gets 92% of whatever comes in at Paul Brown Stadium. The owner of the Colts comes up probably 90%. He's only paying $250,000 a year in rent for the new stadium. So no NFL owner is going to go and work out that kind of deal where the revenue streams aren't available. And in a football stadium, most of the revenue streams come over a 10 or 12-day period, over a 365 or 366-day period. There's very little that you could put in a football stadium other than mega concerts, you know, and I don't know how many Paul McCartney concerts are left in Paul McCartney, or the Rolling Stones, or the Who, or, you know. So when you look, as Alan Sanderson, the University of Chicago economics professor, says, the two biggest wastes of urban space are football stadiums and cemeteries, but you need the cemeteries. So the deal that would have to be cut in LA is pretty simple. Anschutz or Roski, depending on who builds the building, has to have an equity in the team. But is an owner going to give up what might be a minority share, but forcing him into a minority share for chances at the revenue streams in the new Los Angeles stadiums? Now, of course, you know, in LA, you're going to get bigger dollars because it's LA than, say, St. Louis or Jacksonville or Buffalo or Oakland, because there's just more money available from local revenue streams, which is what the NFL fought over in the last lockout. You know, Buffalo and Cincinnati are not equal to Washington, Dallas, the Meadowlands, New England, or Houston, which are the big teams. In San Francisco, the ownership of the 49ers wants to move to Santa Clara, which is really another mess now because Santa Clara residents have come up with enough signatures to go before the city council and say we want to vote on a referendum because the rules have changed since you passed the last referendum in June of 2010. We didn't realize we're going to be stuck with underwriting an $850 million bill for this stadium. You said back then it was about a quarter less. We want a do-over, and the city manager and the city attorney said, no. The deal is a deal, and the Niners, of course, say a deal is a deal, but they have all the signatures, and that's going to court. The NFL just gave the 49ers money to start building it, but you may have a judge saying, wait a second, here's the injunction. I want to, before you start building, review these signatures and review the complaint that these 11,000 people in Sacramento and Santa Clara have about building a stadium in Santa Clara for the 49ers.
And in a state that has initiative and recall, that, Evan, you've got a hot button topic right there.
Well, you would know better. You're a lawyer.
No. Well, let me ask you, you brought up owner Robert Irsay with the Colts.
Jim Irsay.
Jim Irsay, excuse me. And apparently we've come to the close of Super Bowl 46, yes. And during that week, he was apparently, there are quotes attributable to him as to London being the Mecca, the Valhalla for the NFL as to the Super Bowl or team. Or can you tell us a little bit about the NFL's love affair with over the pond, jumping the pond?
I don't know if it's a love affair or not, but the NFL has some very basic problems in the global footprint of sports. NFL football, or American football, is played in the United States. It's played in British Columbia, and that's it. There's no Pop Warner anywhere else. There's no junior high. There's no high school. There's no college in any other country. In Israel, they're beginning to kind of play a little tackle football thanks to Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, who's thrown his support. I just did a TV show on that the other day. Who's thrown his support behind football in Israel. The NFL has gone nowhere with its China initiative. There was supposed to be a game in 2007, 1 year exactly to the day before the Olympics started. That game was postponed. The NFL can't get there. Meanwhile, the NBA has a huge foothold in China. Mm-hmm. The NHL opens its season every year, may not next year because there's a possibility of a lockout, and we'll talk about that on the subsequent show. Baseball is making inroads. Obviously, there's the World Baseball Classic, and they're making some inroads in Italy. And believe it or not, I was in Amsterdam last summer. I was talking on a cruise ship out of Amsterdam. And as I was flying out of the airport, and you know how you look out the window when you're flying out of the airport, and I'm looking down and I see a baseball clover leaf. And I'm saying to myself, and I had been in Amsterdam hearing about in 2014 a baseball stadium with about 30,000 seating capacity will be open. And while I was in Holland, I heard that Major League Baseball is very seriously considering playing a series of games, a 3-game series, in Amsterdam in 2014 or 2015. So obviously there's some headway in the Netherlands, headway in Italy for baseball. The NHL has got Europe locked down. The NBA has Europe. They have China. They're going into India. Baseball is trying to go into India as well. Where's football? So they're hoping to get into London, and they look at it as the gateway to Europe. But if you've been in London, you know that there are betting shops, legalized betting, almost on every street corner. And I was there a couple of years ago when the NFL season was opening. I guess this was 2009. So I went into William Hill and some of the other places just to look around to see what the action was, out of curiosity to see if they were taking action on the NFL. The answer was no. They were taking action in Bermuda in the NFL, the place called Seahorses, which is a little dive in Hamilton, and they had the TVs up and all that. But it's Bermuda, and Americans go there. But the problem in Europe is when the World League of Football was operating in NFL Europe, NFL Europea, there were 5 teams in Germany, and most of the games, the people at the games were from the Air Force bases and the Army bases from Germany. Yeah. And there was a team in Amsterdam as well. But that's who came. They could not get traction in Germany. and they can't really in England. They're trying. They're really trying. The other thing is, St. Louis was supposed to be there. They're owned by Kroenke, who happens to have a piece of Arsenal. Tampa Bay has been there for the last, they were there. They were owned by the Glaziers, who own Man U. So start, connecting the dots, and you could see they're sending teams over there that have a relationship with the English Premiership so they could sell tickets as an add-on.
What are the chances, if you had to look into a crystal ball, as to the Premier League making more of a foothold